right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today, we're going to go through Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners weekly edition. This is the end of the second quarter, so this is a half-year edition as well. We're going to take a look at what all the Bitcoin miners did in the first half of the year, in addition to all of our normal charts. Also, I want to take a look at what Bitcoin did over the weekend. It was a little bit of an unusual weekend versus what's been happening recently, so a lot to go through. If you're new to the channel, we talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners all the time on this channel, so please consider subscribing to the channel. And of course, if you could do us a great big favor and smash the like button, it helps the channel out a lot. It helps the video out a lot, so we really appreciate it. All right, let's get right into it. I'm going to start not with my normal charts. I'm going to start on the one-day Bitcoin chart because I just want to take a look at what's happened over the last week. 1 week ago today, we had a big red candle with a big candle wick, and that went all the way down to around $58,500. That daily candle a week ago, last Monday, closed at around $60,200. So it's now 1 week later. Every single daily candle has closed above that. We did have one candle that was very close. It came within $100 of that, but this is actually a positive trend. I'm looking at some sideways consolidation for a solid week now after about 3 weeks of really going down pretty much in a straight line. So people were getting very nervous. The fear and greed index got all the way down to 30, which is fear. It has not been there in a long time. We'll take a look at that real quickly later. But things are starting to reverse. So, it's too soon to tell, but we do now have 1 full week of really sideways consolidation. And another thing I want to point out on the one-day time frame is these two green candles are Saturday and Sunday. So you're going to see Friday was a big down day. And unlike most weekends, we had a big rally over the weekend. So we've had about 4 weeks in a row where the weekends were very flat with not much activity, but Bitcoin was up about 5% over the weekend. So far as I'm making this video Monday in the middle of the day, we're just about even. We're a little bit in the green on the day today. We'll see where the day finishes. I will also note that, just a few hours into trading, the Bitcoin miners are way up today, but we've seen reversals in the middle of the day as well, so we'll see where they close. So I don't want to be too focused on today. I want to take a look really at what happened last week and what's happened year to date. So that's what's going on with Bitcoin. I'm a little bit encouraged, but obviously we are still trading very much sideways inside of a range. Really, over the last 4 months, we're over 120 days into trading in a range, and we have not broken out of the top or the bottom of that range. But it is nice to see that over the last week, we did find some support, and we are doing some sideways consolidation. Okay, let's get to the Bitcoin miners. Okay, this was last week. So again, we're looking at the top 12 Bitcoin miners. So you're gonna see the first thing that jumps out on this chart in gold, as always, is Bitcoin. Bitcoin was down 7% on the week last week. Again, this is the week ended Friday, June 28th. So with Bitcoin down 7%, once again, we do see a trend where the majority of the Bitcoin miners outperformed Bitcoin. We are now 2.5 full months into this trend, and you're going to see some of them dramatically outperform. So I want to take a look at a few on the top and then a few on the bottom because we did have a few that lagged behind. HUT and Bit Digital were up 21 and 20% respectively. So those were huge moves to the upside on a week, again, where Bitcoin was down 7%. I will say both HUT and Bit Digital had press releases come out last week, both of which related to really high performance computing / AI. The Bitcoin miners that are involved in that have been issuing press releases over the last really 2 or 3 weeks have gotten a little bit of a bump. So year to date, they're not necessarily out in front of everybody, but recently over the last 2 or 3 weeks, that has provided a big bump for some of the Bitcoin miners. We're seeing more and more of the Bitcoin miners get involved in the high performance computing. So we'll see if that trend continues, while we still have other Bitcoin miners that are staying away from that and are trying to stay more pure play Bitcoin mining companies. Okay, there were some other companies that had a big week. BitDeer was up 8%. TeraWulf was up 7%. We're going to take a look at year to date, and I will tell you, spoiler alert, TeraWulf now, through the first 6 months of the year, was the #1 performing Bitcoin mining stock. It just pulled into first place this week. This is the first week of the year that TeraWulf was in first place. So as we close out the first half of the year, it's TeraWulf that ended up ahead of everybody else. We'll take a look at that chart in a few minutes. There's several Bitcoin miners that did perform well in the first half of the year, while there's a couple others that did lag. At the bottom of this list, we did have 4 Bitcoin miners that underperformed Bitcoin. CleanSpark was down 8%, Cypher was down 9%, Bitfarms was down 13%, and Iris Energy was down 15%. So some of these, particularly Iris Energy, they are the second best performing Bitcoin miner over the last 2.5-month period. So they have had a huge run up recently. So this is just a little bit of a natural pullback in my opinion. Okay, so this is what happened last week. Let's zoom out a little bit to about the last 10 weeks. This chart is now a 10.5 week period. It started on April 16th. We've been following this really for the last 2.5 months. April 16th appeared to be a very natural bottom for the Bitcoin miners. Most of them hit a local low on or around that day. So we've been measuring their progress since then because the first 3.5 months up until that day, the Bitcoin miners were performing very poorly. All the Bitcoin miners except for CleanSpark were actually in the red or negative year to date through April 16th. And there's been a reversal since that time, and now you can see this chart is very green. So we still have at the top Core Scientific up 251% in this 10.5 week period. So that is a gigantic move. That move actually is on also a high performance computing / AI contract that they got. It's a 12-year, potentially multi-billion-dollar contract. So they have been off to the races. Iris Energy, even after the pullback last week that we looked at, Iris Energy was the underperformer on the week last week, but you're going to see that still leaves them in second place in this 10.5 week window, up 171%. TeraWulf up 145%. We also have HUT up over 100% and BitDeer at 96%, so very close to a double there as well. There were a few that lagged behind the group, but still significantly outperformed Bitcoin. So at the bottom of the list, really tied for last, CleanSpark and Riot were up 16%. I do want to note there's a big difference between these two companies because in the first 3.5 months of the year, CleanSpark was the #1 performing Bitcoin mining stock. It was the only stock that was in the green or up year to date going into this. So for them to be up 16% just means that a lot of the other Bitcoin miners have been playing catch up. However, Riot was down going into that time frame. So Riot is lagging behind. You've got Hive up 21%. And Cypher up 26%, and then we really see a jump. Okay, so with that said, let's take a look at the year to date. So I want to point out once again, year to date, as of June 28th, that was the last trading day of the first half of the year. So this chart right here represents what the Bitcoin miners did in the first half of the year. And I will tell you, this chart, in my opinion, looks pretty good based on where we were about 2.5 months ago. 2.5 months ago, every single Bitcoin miner was red on this chart. Some of them were down 50 or 60%. Only CleanSpark was in the green. And now you can see that has changed dramatically. So there are now 1, 2, 3, 4 Bitcoin miners that are outperforming Bitcoin as of the first half of the year. And as we noted earlier, TeraWulf is now the #1 performing Bitcoin mining stock in the year 2024, up 85% halfway through the year. Core Scientific up 68%. That is in second place on the year. It's worth noting that Core Scientific was the #1 performing Bitcoin mining stock in the year 2023, and it's now the #2 performing Bitcoin mining stock in the year 2024. So that has been on a gigantic run. Iris Energy up 58%, outperforming Bitcoin, and CleanSpark up 45%, outperforming Bitcoin by a little bit. So halfway through the year, Bitcoin was up 43%. It was up more than 60% at its peak. We did take out the previous cycle's all-time high of 69,000, and we've been bouncing above and below that. As of the half point in the year, obviously we were a bunch off of that, closer to around $60,000. This morning we've run up a couple of $1,000s even from there. So then we have 3 more Bitcoin miners that are in the green. HUT is up 12% year to date, BitDeer is up 4% year to date, and Cypher got all the way back to 0. So you can see there are still a few Bitcoin miners with some work to do. Some are closing in on 0, but there are a few that are really lagging the field. Riot is in absolute last place, down 41%. So Riot really in the first half of this year is the underperformer. I do think this has a lot to do with their monthly operational reports. Riot has promised big things between now and the end of the year, so we're going to see if they can perform, but it seems to me, in my opinion, the market is really in a wait-and-see mode with Riot. They're waiting for all of this exahash they've promised to come online and for it to turn into Bitcoin that they're mining, because they've also not been the most efficient Bitcoin miner. Now, to be fair, they do get a lot of energy credits, so they intentionally curtail to get millions and millions of dollars of energy credits. So I think they get a little bit punished for that. So in general, I'm taking a look at Riot. That is one of the underperformers. Hive has been an underperformer, down 32%. And BitDigital's been an underperformer, down 25%. It's also worth noting, out of these 12 stocks, BitDigital and Hive are significantly smaller than the other 10 we look at. They are between $300 and $400 million market caps. All the rest of these are over $1 billion. Marathon is over $5 billion. So these two are the two smaller Bitcoin miners. I'm looking at these as a potential opportunity. And again, this is why I present these charts. I just try and look for things that pop out on these charts. So these three stocks right here, Bit Digital, Hive, and Riot, have been underperforming the field. And again, this chart year to date is the midpoint of the year. We are now halfway through the year. So we're going to see what happens the second half of the year. Obviously, if you're investing in a Bitcoin miner, you expect it to be outperforming Bitcoin. That's the whole point of the Bitcoin miner investment. So there's still a lot of these that have a lot of work left to do if they're going to do that. I'm going to take a look at one other chart quickly. There are 7 Bitcoin miners that we knocked off of our analysis. These are the smallest 7 by far. All 7 of these put together have a market cap of about $250 million. DMG is down 15%. Other than that, these are all down between really 41 and 69%. So the small Bitcoin miners are struggling after the halving here, and they've been struggling all year. So I did just want to show we're at the halfway point in the year. So I wanted to give everybody this chart. We're not going to look at these too much going forward, but if something big does happen with any of these companies, of course, we'll talk about them, but we have removed them from the rest of our charts. Next, I want to take a look at just the overall market. So on this chart, we look at the 4 major US indexes. With that, we take silver and gold, and then of course the 2 largest cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum. You can see the cryptocurrencies, even with a rough week last week, are still the best performers on this list by far. So Ethereum up about 46.6% year to date. Bitcoin up just under 43% year to date as of last Friday. But a few other things worth noting. You're going to see everything is now green on this chart. Silver up 22.5%. This is one of the best years silver's had in a long time. The NASDAQ was up 18% in the first half of the year. That way exceeded everybody's expectation. Big money felt like the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 were going to be pretty flat on the year this year. So the first half of this year proved them wrong. We'll see what the second half of the year is. The NASDAQ and the S&P 500, which is up just under 15%, continue to hit new all-time highs. So last week they did hit another new all-time high. They didn't close at their all-time high, but this is a series of new all-time highs for the NASDAQ and the S&P. Gold up just under 13%, and then lagging behind is the Dow. But really the big lagger on this is the Russell, which did just flip green this week. So it's been flipping back and forth between red and green, up only 1% on the year. So dramatically underperforming its peers. So the Russell is another thing I continue to have my eye on as a potential opportunity. Again, not financial advice, but to me, it's been 3+ years that the Russell has been underperforming fairly dramatically versus the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. So we will see if the second half of 2024 is when the Russell can finally have that breakout and start to catch up to all the other indexes. I also want to take a quick look at this chart. This is the inflows and outflows of the ETFs. So this has very closely been following the performance of Bitcoin. And you're going to see we did have a run. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of last week were green inflow days for Bitcoin. Prior to that, 9 out of 10 days were in the red. That's the first time that's happened. Now, of course, the ETFs have not been trading for that long, just since January. But this was a rough period, and this 9 out of 10 days, this couple of weeks, this corresponds to when Bitcoin really took a turn from around 71,000 down, near 60,000 by the time we were done. These 4 days represent the fact that really over the last week, we've seen Bitcoin trade sideways. So we will see if this is a momentum change and if this continues. I am encouraged by the trend here with the ETFs. Lastly, the Fear and Greed Index is at 53, which is now neutral. But I do want to show, if we take a look at the 3-month time frame, you'll see we kind of had a double bottom here. On June 25th, the Fear and Greed Index got down to 30, which is fear. And then it got there again on June 29th. So we had a significant period of time where the Fear and Greed Index was in greed over 70. It has pulled back dramatically. This feels like a very nice reset to me. So we're going to see, there's a lot of signs, in my opinion, that seem like Bitcoin may be going through a bottoming out process. We've been going sideways for over 4 months now. This is a nice reset on the Fear and Greed Index. So we're going to keep our eye on these things. I'm just trying to point out a few of the things that jump out at me. Lastly, we're in the middle of the trading day now at this point as I'm making this video. And there are several Bitcoin miners up 9 or 10% on the day. Every single Bitcoin miner is in the green right now. So we're going to see how the rest of the trading day goes. But just know right now, Bitcoin had a great weekend. It's having a decent Monday. And the Bitcoin miners, Monday morning anyway, have been off to the races. So we'll see see where we go from there. That's what's going on with Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. I want to thank everybody for watching. Remember to smash the like button, and of course, if you have not yet, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.